Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Ruelas, and I am the host of this show, which is called Success Stories by Women. So this is one of my most passionate projects right now. And so I just want to share a little bit about me, how this show came about, and what to expect. So I will have a combination of video episodes and then audio only. So make sure you subscribe. That way you get the latest updates. But I'm going to first kind of introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, I am a first generation college graduate and I am a DACA recipient. So I wanted to create this podcast for a few reasons. Number one is I want to share my story so that if there are other women out there like myself, you can kind of learn a little bit from the past, I would say 10 years of things that I've discovered. I am 30 years old and I will definitely say from 18 to 30, it has been a roller coaster ride to just discover so many things. And the thing about this show is that it is centered about women, and I will have so many guests that will join me and they will share their stories. So there'll be all types of other women in this show. There'll be entrepreneurs, women in career, so many different fields, women that have chosen so many different paths. So it's not just about one specific type of life. You're going to get a variety. And what I'm excited to share with you is just a few key things of what to expect with my episodes. So number one is I want to just share how common it is that life never goes as planned. So I will definitely say that when I first went into college back in 2009, I thought I was going to go in for a communications degree because I wanted to be a news anchor. So I think it came about like 7th or 8th grade. I wanted to be a news anchor, and then I wanted to be on a show like Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres. I just thought that would be the most amazing career, right? And I get to college and I end up switching my major from communications to business within the first year. And from business, flash forward to where I am now in life. I'm a senior project manager for a huge company here in Las Vegas, Nevada, that is basically the market leader for homes that get renovated. So you know those shows where it's like flip this home or HGTV shows? I basically live that every single day. And I started as project manager. Actually, I should say I started as assistant project manager. I had to prove myself. Then within a few months, I was promoted to project manager all over a Northern California region. And then just recently, I applied for a new position in Las Vegas. And within a month, I got promoted to senior project manager, right? So life never goes as planned. That's one of the things I definitely will always share in my episodes, and I'll just share examples of that. And it's okay, because honestly, I will say all those changes that have happened in my life is what have helped me get to where I am today. And it has been an amazing journey. It is stressful at times. And of course, sometimes your expectations are not met and you can get frazzled and frustrated. But one of the things I've learned now that I'm 30 years old is that sometimes it's for a reason. There's a higher purpose or a higher reason that you may not know right at that given moment. So it's okay if you're in that stage of life where you're thinking about changing careers, when you're thinking, at the end of the day, you ask yourself, am I doing what I really want to do? Am I fulfilling my purpose? And I just want to remind you, it's okay, number one, to have those thoughts. And number two, it's okay if your life didn't go as planned. Life happens. There's a lot of changes. And I'll share more throughout the episodes of how I ended up being project manager. I will say it was not at all luck. It was so much of it was me being self-taught and having the grit to break barriers into what is commonly a male-dominated industry. But I wanted to do that so bad that I was willing to become a self-taught student and just go after it. And, after so many years, I'm very proud of myself that I'm senior project manager and I'm one of the top leaders in Las Vegas market. And I'm one of the very few women leaders. And that's kind of what this podcast is about, is I want to share also, the second reason I did this podcast is I want to share women stories where we've broken barriers, right? If you're a first generation in anything, first generation college student, first generation to get a master's degree, first generation to get a career with benefits, first generation to open up a business that's going to leave a legacy, first generation to make it to TV, whatever it is that you're breaking that barrier for your family, for future generations, I want to share that. I want to hear your story. I want other people to hear the story because it's just so inspiring. One of the things I encountered early on, as soon as I graduated college with my business degree, is I had a big question mark. I was just not sure what to do with the business degree. I always picture myself as a young girl. I wanted to be those women that were in business clothes with a business bag, wearing heels. I just wanted to do that so bad. I was in speech and debate in high school and I loved dressing up, so I just want to share whatever it is that your dreams are and whatever dreams you have, you can still go after them. But many times I have heard, I've seen it myself, I've experienced it myself, and I've heard other women express that most of the time, when you're in this corporate world positions, or even as an entrepreneur, as a Latina or any other, background that you may have, sometimes it may feel like you're the only woman in that group. And I'll share an example. So recently I was part of a lunch, like a luncheon, a corporate lunch, where there's the top leaders of markets gather, right, to the lunch. So it's paid by the company. It's a big deal. And as I'm sitting there, I look around the table and I'm the only woman there, number one. And then two, I'm the only Latina woman, right? Sometimes in those situations, there's two things that can come to mind. Number one is, this is awkward. I don't know how to feel about this. It could be a little bit intimidating. Or number two, what I've now come to realize is, this is a little bit awkward, or it is a little bit uncommon, but I'm going to take that power within myself and I'm just going to be me, who I am, Lori. And I will, showcase why I'm at that table. I'm not going to, crack under pressure, as some might say. So I just want to share and hear more of those stories and kind of how they've been overcame. So I've had plenty of examples, and I just want to remind people, it's okay if you're the first generation of a lot of things, first generation, and you may feel alone. I don't want you to feel alone. That's why I created this podcast. I want to hear all these amazing stories and situations that you've been in, and I want to see how they have been overcome, or how you personally overcame them. The other thing that I want to kind of touch upon on these episodes is some of the pain points that come with when you're college educated, or even if you're self-taught and you have, worked yourself up a ladder, whatever titles, whatever you call it. There's a lot of issues that still you may encounter, or obstacles, I should say. Some of them is having to always prove yourself. If you've ever been in that situation where you have to constantly prove yourself that you can do the job, or constantly having to prove yourself why you should get that raise, having to constantly prove yourself why you have the position that you have, I've heard it all. I've heard it so many times. And so I just want to open up that discussion. And I hope that by people sharing their stories, if you're starting off in your career or you're in your career, I hope it empowers you when you're in those situations, to ask for the fair pay, to ask for that raise confidently. My first two jobs out of college, I didn't really negotiate my pay. I think number one is because I was naive, right? Usually when I got that offer letter, my first paying job out of college was $45,000. That was such a huge amount to me in 2014, because it was more than my mom had ever made, more than my dad had ever made, more than anybody in my family had ever made. And it was probably more than 3 of my family members had ever made, right? Another thing I want to open up the discussion on is those situations when you have to negotiate pay, or those situations where you're asking for the raise. So I will share, at my first 2 jobs, I did not ask for a higher rate. I was straight out of college, and I thought the $45,000 in 2014 in San Francisco, I thought that was the greatest thing ever. And it was, right? Depends what you compare it to. So I was comparing it to what my mom had made in the past, what my dad had made, what they had made combined. And so that's the only perspective I knew, right? So if you don't grow up with other people around you negotiating salaries, I believe that you're not prepared or you're not equipped to be in those situations when you're 18 or 19 or 25, out of college, or even, as you get older and you start moving up the ladder, you still don't know, right? Sometimes how to handle these situations, because there's kind of a negative connotation sometimes of like, oh, am I asking for too much? Is it fair? Is it not fair? Whatever thoughts you're having when it comes to pay in the corporate world or your career or positions that you have, I just want to remind you to know your value, know the worth that you bring to a company, and it's okay to negotiate. Now that I am in a little bit older and higher in my position, I come in with a firm number, and because of my experience, because of the work that I've put in for the past, what is it now, like over 10 years of work experience, but because of the work that I've put in, I have like 4 or 5 years of project manager experience. I no longer fall in that category of like just starting off. Sometimes companies, they tell you, well, you're just starting off. Well, you don't have the experience. Well, so and so. And sometimes they use that. They say, oh, you're just recently graduated from college. And sometimes they use that as a tool to kind of, you think to yourself, oh, okay, they're right. I don't deserve that higher pay on the higher end of the spectrum. But I want to remind you to not let that stop you from negotiating. And especially if you have been in your career for a while and you definitely think there's an opportunity to get a higher pay, go for it. I recently was coached on that. She's going to actually be one of my guests, so I'll explain that a little bit more. But it literally took her to coach me through that process, because first you have to overcome your mental barriers of what you think is an appropriate number or what's a realistic number, right? And so I just want to remind, whatever stage you are in life, it's okay to negotiate and it's okay to fight for your value. And there's a professional way to go about it. I don't mean like, fight and go all in and things like that, but I will hopefully be sharing some tips soon, but definitely she's going to be one of my guests. But I will be kind of touching on that in a future episode about how to attack that process by itself. And so, yeah, that's a little bit, about what to expect with the podcast show and what's coming in the future. I do see that this will be evolving. I have had this idea of the podcast show it's been over a year, and I have this, I would say, calling, or I have this purpose idea that has been in my mind for over a year. And initially when I started getting this idea that women need to hear more common stories, women need more career mentorship, women need more life mentorship. Sometimes it's not just career, just life changes, right? Different events that happen in life. How do women overcome that, and what support systems are out there? So when I first got the idea of getting into the space of having more conversations with women, what I ended up creating out of it was a mentorship group. And this mentorship group started with my sorority sisters from Sacramento State. And basically it started right when COVID happened. When COVID happened, the first thing I thought of was, how do I create a community for people that have just lost a lot of their plans, have lost a lot of the structure? And so what I ended up creating was a mentorship with weekly meetings and bi-weekly guests that share their career stories. And it's been going for over a year. And now I'm at that point where that has kind of ended. I saw it as a season. It was, during COVID, virtual and things like that. And now I'm transitioning into the podcast show. And I had an amazing time. I was doing that while I was still helping my fiance in his business. But those weekly calls or bi-weekly calls with women is what pretty much empowered me, right? So I hope that this podcast show also empowers you and also allows you to feel like you have a community. That's the number one thing for me, is that we have a community. And as this evolves, I hope that we have a point where it gets so big that we'll have meetups, right? So that's my long-term vision. That's one thing about me I would definitely say that I would love to share here is that I'm huge on having goals and visions that are within that same year. So goals that I accomplish within that same year, 3-year goals and 5-year goals. And I typically always have them written in one way or another. I journal a lot. I use notebooks. I use planners. I use everything and anything. I'm a big writer to kind of remind myself. But it's been interesting. Every time I've had those 2, 3, 5-year goals, they never go as planned, but I always make progression. I always move forward in one way or another. And so that's another thing, that I'll be focusing on is there is this idea, especially in the culture right now, is that you need to be hustling towards your goal, moving towards your goals. And that is okay. And sometimes the goals don't come out, as planned, as I shared earlier. For me, I am big about hustling towards your goal, grids, go, go, go. But as you guys get to know me a little bit more on the episodes, I'm also about self-care. I'm also about balance. I'm also about, okay, it's okay to one day, going after everything and anything and working 14 hours. But then on Sundays, I'm like, pause. So you'll see a blend of that. And I hope you can identify with that. If you're at that stage where you're like, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, or I work Monday through Friday, Monday through Sunday, that's okay. There's no wrong way to go about your goals. Also, if you're like, hey, I have a part-time business, I have a part-time project, or it's okay if even you say I have no project, that's okay too. I've been in the different stages. I have taken pauses from work. I have switched sometimes to being part-time. And I just want to create the community where wherever you are in life, no one gets left out. And I want this to be a huge support for people as you transition. So I'm very excited. I have so many guests lined up, and I look forward to getting to know some of you guys. Reach out to me via comments, subscriptions. You can find me on Instagram. So this right here is my Instagram at Lori Ruelas. I'm also on Twitter, and I'm also on Facebook. And I do have a Facebook page dedicated for this episodes. So follow me on Instagram, look for me on Facebook. And the Facebook page is actually called Success Stories by Women. And you'll be able to identify it because of the logo. But any questions, anything you want me to talk about, let me know on Instagram. I want to get to know each and every single one of you guys. And let's stay tuned. There's a lot to come.